Oh, okay, guys, this is the video for Math 141. We are going over problem 1 from quiz 4. I'm going to be going over the yellow version of the quiz. If you have the green version, I will show you the answers to your question 1 at the end of this video. So, we see that we are setting up but not solving a system of equations, and we're using the following problem. Okay, so if you need to pause and take a minute to read it, that's fine. Go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and dive right in. So we have a bakery that's making cherry cookies, cherry bars, and cherry breads. Okay, we have a total of 11 pounds of cherries. We want twice as many cookies as bars, and it says one batch of cookies makes 100 cookies and uses 2 pounds of cherries. A batch of bars makes 75 bars and uses 1 pound of cherries. And then a batch of bread makes 4 breads and it uses also a pound of cherries. The cookies are going to sell for 40 cents each, the bars for $1, the breads for $3. Okay? It says how many of each item should be made to use all the cherries and have a revenue of $306. So starting out, what some of y'all did mess up on is you thought that this was a linear programming problem, okay? But it's not. It's not a linear programming problem because we see that we are not trying to maximize or minimize the revenue. Nowhere does it say maximize or minimize the revenue. That is a clue that would set off to you that you have to do a linear programming problem with the inequalities and the constraints and the objective function, but not in this case. In this case, we're setting it up. This is just like problem 10 from the review activity, if you were here the week we did the review activity before your test. So, I'm going to go ahead and label our variables, and I'm going to do it 2 different ways. So I'm going to show you the first way that you can do it, the way that most people prefer to do this problem. So, I'm going to label our variables x, y, and z. So x is going to be the number of cherry cookies, y is the number of cherry bars, and z is the number of cherry breads. Now notice I wrote a little note over here that since there's nothing about max or min, this is not a linear programming problem. Okay? So the first thing we're going to look at, I'm going to go ahead and skip everything that's in blue. We're going to come back to that after. I'm going to start with what's in red right here. It says we want twice as many cookies as bars. Okay, you want twice as many cookies as bars. So which one's bigger, cookies or bars? It should be cookies, right? If you want twice as many cookies as bars, you want more cookies than you do bars. Remember, the one that you want to be bigger is not the one that gets the multiplier. It's the other one that gets the multiplier, okay? So we want 2 times our bars to equal our number of cookies. See how cookies is what we wanted to be bigger, and it is not what got that 2 multiplier, okay? The bars is. So this is the part of our problem that we set up to find our ratio, okay? So the twice as many cookies as bars. The next thing I'm going to look at is the revenue statement. So at the end it says the cookies sell for 40 cents each, bars for $1 each, and breads for $3 each. So I'm going to put that into a little equation now. So we can say that 40 cents times the number of cookies, $1 times the number of bars, and $3 times the number of bread should equal $306 for revenue. Okay, so this is our equation talking about revenue. Alright, so now comes a little trickier part. Some people just looked at this pounds of cherries part and said, oh, 2 pounds of cherries times x plus 1 pound of cherries times y plus 1 pound of cherries times z equals 11. That's not true, okay? Because if you said that, you're saying that it's 2 pounds of cherries to make 1 cookie. And that's not correct. It's 2 pounds of cherries to make a batch of cookies. And a batch of cookies makes 100 cookies. Okay? So we're going to write it a little bit differently. I'm going to say that 2 pounds times the number of batches of cookies that we have plus 1 pound times the number of batches of bars that we have plus 1 pound times the number of batches of bread that we have is equal to the 11 pounds of cherries. Okay? Everyone okay with that? So it's the batches that take those 2, 1, 1 pound. Okay? So now we need to think, how can we talk about batches of cookies, bars, and breads in terms of X, Y, and Z, in terms of the cookies, the bars, and the breads themselves? So what I said was, well, there's 100 cookies times a batch of cookies gives me my total number of cookies. Y'all see that? So if there's 2 batches times 100 cookies per batch, then my total number of cookies is 200. In the same way here, I'm saying that 75 bars times however many batches of bars I make will give me Y, my total number of bars. And over here, 4 times, which is how many bread is made in a batch, times the number of batches of bread that you make will give you Z, your total number of bread. Okay? And now we just need to isolate for the batches of cookies, batches of bars, batches of bread, and take those statements and plug them back in. Okay? So I isolated by saying batches of cookies is equal to X over 100. You just divide each side by 100 and you get X over 100. Same thing here. When you isolate for batches of bars, you get Y over 75, and here you get Z over 4. Okay? So now I have 3 different expressions that can be plugged back into these equations because they're equivalent to the batches. Okay? My batches of cookies, of bars, and of bread. These expressions can go back into my equation. So that's what I've done here. You plug them back in to each of their respective locations. And you can leave it like this if you want. If you want to simplify it, you can simplify this over here. We would have 2x over 100, which is the same as x over 50. So that's x over 50 plus y over 75 plus z over 4 equals 11 pounds of cherries. Always remember what your variables are that you're coming from, okay? Now, there is another way you can do it, and this is shown in the review activity number 10. There were 2 different ways. So let's talk about the other way, if you would prefer to do it the other way, okay? So, in the other way, we would make X, Y, and Z our batches of cherry cookies, our batches of cherry bars, and our batches of cherry breads, okay? So then you could say 2 pounds times our batches of cookies plus our batches of bars plus our batches of breads would equal 11 pounds, right? But then when we went and did our ratio, you would have to change things up. So our ratio says twice as many cookies as bars. So our number of cookies should be 2 times our number of bars. And our number of cookies is no longer X. We would have to do the batches of cookies times 100 cookies per batch would give you the total number of cookies. Same over here. On the inside, we would have, to find our total number of bars, we would have Y, which is our batches of bars, times 75 bars per batch, and that would be 75Y on the inside here. So then our new ratio equation would be 100x is equal to 150y. The same thing goes for the revenue equation. You need number of cookies, bars, and breads, not the batches. So for number of cookies, we would put in 100x. For number of bars, it would be 75y. And in the same way with the number of breads, since z is the batches of breads, and there makes 4 breads per batch, you would put 4z in there. And then if you multiply this together, this is your new revenue equation. Something important to note that I did not put in here, but you do have to put if you denote your variables this way. Since the question asks how many of each item should be made, and if we actually solve for X, Y, and Z, we're not going to find the number of cookies, bars, and breads. We're going to find the number of batches of those things. So since we want to know how many of each item, you would have to, off to the side, write down how do you find the number of each item, okay? And for the number of cookies, it would just be 100 cookies times the number of batches of cookies. So 100x would be how we find the number of cookies. and then it would be 75 bars times the number of batches of bars. So it'd be 75y is how you find the number of bars. And then the same thing for breads, it would be 4z is how you find the number of breads. That is another way that you could possibly do this problem if you wanted to do it that way. And finally, these are the answers for the green quiz. You can pause the video and look over this and see what you messed up on. And that is it for this video.